Welcome, everybody. We'll give everyone a second to get logged in and get connected to audio before we start. Hey, Holly, how are you doing? Hanging in there for your first
Great.
week?
How are you?
Good.
It's going well.
If you don't mind, I'll introduce you.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you.
Well, welcome everybody again to our December Community Cafe. Thank you all. I see some familiar faces for coming back again and joining us for another month. This month we are talking about homelessness across our catchment area. And we have some wonderful panelists that I think that you're gonna get some valuable information from. And so our community cafes, if you haven't joined us before, they're meant to be very informal dialogue with you guys. So we want to encourage your questions, pop them in the chat box. Amber is monitoring the chat box. So we'll either answer your question in the chat box or we'll say it out loud for you, or feel free to speak up and ask any of our panelists or any of our partners members. And we'll be glad to either answer your question or find out the answer for you if we don't have it right offhand. But again, we appreciate you being here and we hope you get some valuable information and have some valuable dialogue with your community partners.
Katie, let's go ahead and let Mr. Cortez give the information and we'll enable the interpretation.
Sure, I skipped the whole part. So we are offering interpretation if you're in need of that. And I am going to hand it over to Mr. Cortez to explain that for you.
Muy buenos días a todos, bienvenidos a esta sesión de Community Café, aquí con Partners. Hoy vamos a tocar el tema de las personas sin vivienda, los desamparados, y vamos a tener también una conversación informal. Queremos que todos participen en este diálogo. Tenemos la cajita de chat si ustedes quieren hacer alguna pregunta, y de esta manera los panelistas pueden contestar sus preguntas, atender sus comentarios. Vamos a tener un comentario valioso entre nosotros de Community Partners, y esta sesión se va a interpretar simultáneamente en español. Tenemos a Amber aquí para atender la cajita de chat si tienen alguna pregunta. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez.
Yes, sir.
And the second thing that we have is closed captioning, and it's auto-generated by Zoom. So sometimes it can be a little bit distracting if you don't need it, and you do have the option to turn that off. It's auto-populated by Zoom. And so our panelists today are from all across our catchment area. We have Casey McCall from Hickory PD, Ruth from Winston, Michelle Knapp from Iredell County, and Tina is with us from Partner. She's our housing manager. So I am going to turn it over to Tina to start us off.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So glad to be here with you all. I am going to share our screen, and I'm going to start off talking about the continuum of care in our area. And if you give me just a second to get this where I need to be. All right, can you guys see that okay? All right, thanks, appreciate that. So I'm going to talk about the continuum of care. So when we talk about homelessness, a lot of times we forget about the continuum of care and how important it is to helping those that are experiencing homelessness. So the continuum of care is, it's a region or local planning body that coordinates housing and services funding for homeless families and individuals. So basically, these are folks that come together in the community and talk about people experiencing homelessness and how to help them. And then truly, it's in the word continuum of care, help people move through the different stages of homelessness that they may be experiencing. So that is truly what the continuum of care is. We have several COCs in our partners catchment area. So our housing our housing staff try to participate in all of the continuum of cares across our region, and we even take on leadership roles. We feel like it's really important for us to be at the table, and we want to encourage anyone and everyone to come to the table and be a part of the continuum of care. A lot of the folks that are experiencing behavioral health issues end up in some type of housing crisis at some time in their life. And so we feel like some of those folks that are experiencing homelessness and even chronically homeless are dealing with mental health, substance abuse, different challenges that kind of keep them where they are. And so it's really important for the behavioral health community and those that are supporting behavioral health services be a part at the table. And so that's where we fit in and feel like it's an important part of what we do. So there are actually 3 continuum of cares across our partners catchment area. Gaston, Lincoln, Cleveland continuum of care is its own continuum of care. Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, they have their own continuum of care. And then there's the balance of state, and it's divided up into regions, and it's broken down there for you. And so there's actually 4 regions, Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, and Region 5, that we have across our catchment area, and we participate in all of those. I would encourage you to be a part of those. If you want to get connected to those, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat box later. If someone would like to do that for me, that'd be great, one of our staff folks. But you can email me if you're interested, and I will try to connect you to the appropriate continuum of care where you fit in. There are basically 4 parts in a continuum of care. So you have your outreach intake assessment in order to identify the service needs. Then you have emergency shelter providers that are providing safe alternatives to living outside or being in their vehicles, those kinds of things. We have transitional housing programs with supportive services, and then we have permanent supportive housing. Those are the 4 parts really to the continuum. And so the folks that are coming to the table really have specialties in each of these areas. And so if you're working with an individual, or if you're an individual that's experiencing homelessness, you can come and be a part of the continuum of care. It's open to everyone. And the best thing about being at the table is the relationships that are built to try to help folks move through the stages of where they are and to move to more self-sustaining housing. The continuum of care is tasked with tracking and maintaining data of the homeless population. So one of the things that we do annually is called the point in time count. So it's an annual count that's done in January, and it's really just a snapshot of homelessness in each community, and it's done across the country. And HUD requires us to do this. So if you're receiving funding, HUD requires us to do a point in time count, and that just makes sense because HUD wants to know what are the numbers of people that we want to support, and how do we support those, and how do we target the money to the appropriate areas that need the funding, that kind of thing. And so what happens with the point in time count, it truly is a snapshot. So let's say we go to a family reunion and we take a picture of everybody that's at the family reunion. Well, Uncle Bob and Aunt Susie, they weren't able to attend, so we missed them in the picture, but we know they're still out there. And so the point in time count really just takes that snapshot. It doesn't get everybody. We know that there are folks that we miss, and so we really work hard to try to capture all those folks, but sometimes we just aren't able to do that. The point in time count is coming up. It's the last week in January, so it's just in about a month across the country. So if you are interested in helping with the point in time count, we really want you to be involved with those and connect with the continuum of cares, because we do need volunteers for that. So some of the communities actually go out and try to count the folks. Some folks do it through an assessment. Some folks, it's done different ways across the continuum of cares, but it all happens the last week in January. And so we continue to need folks to assist with that and help with that. And if you're interested in that, you can also email me about that, and I can get you connected to the right places to be able to participate in that and help. Sometimes it's just as simple as making donations to help with that point in time count. When we go out, we try to give folks incentives for helping us collect this data, because it is a lot of personal information. And the things that are collected is basic demographics. their gender, their age, information about services that they may have or may not have participated in the past. It looks at release from institutions such as jails, hospitals, things like that. So we really get an idea of where gaps are in our homeless system. So it's a really useful tool for us in our communities. When we do the point in time count, there is a definition that HUD requires us to go by. So when we look at homelessness, we're not looking at those folks who are sofa surfing, moving from place to place, staying on a friend's couch or a family member's couch. We are actually looking at those who are literally homeless in a vehicle, in an emergency shelter, or a transitional housing program that's specific for individuals who are homeless. Folks that are fleeing domestic violence, we look at those shelters. We look at hotels or motels. If someone is staying there and that hotel or motel is paid for by others, not themselves, that's considered homeless. So those are the criteria for when we do the point in time count. And then also for a good bit of the HUD funding that's available, it follows this HUD definition. So I just wanted to share that with you. So some of the outcomes from the continuum of care, if you're participating in the continuum of care, it's an access to network of resources. So the contacts and the relationships and the partnerships that are made in your community to help people navigate through their homeless experience is invaluable. So if I know that I can call up Casey or Ruth and say, hey, I got this individual and I'm not sure what to do with this person. Can you help me? Or do you have space at the shelter? Or do you know how to help this person? We also do case conferencing. So folks are identified as homeless and put on a list to access housing services and housing programs. So they can get in line. There are programs that are specifically for individuals that are homeless, and they have to go through the continuum of care through what's called coordinated entry. So it's a single point for all housing homeless individuals or individuals that are experiencing homelessness to access programs. And then when we're able to help people get into housing and we're able to get people stable, the outcomes that we see for those individuals, we see better health. So we see people that are experiencing homelessness that are worn, that are tired, that are struggling with things. And when they get housing, a lot of times their health improves. We also see reduced hospital stays. So a lot of times some folks go to the emergency room just because they don't have anywhere else to go. And then we also see reduced healthcare costs. It's been proven that if we can put people in housing, particularly permanent supportive housing, that is cheaper than actually housing someone in a shelter. So if we're paying rent and utilities for an individual, that's actually cheaper than paying for them to stay in a congregate setting, such as the emergency shelters. So those are some of the really big benefits. And that's briefly my presentation on the continuum of care. And if there are any questions, I can either take those now, or if you guys want me to wait till the end, or if there's some in the chat box, we can do those. Just let me know.
Hey, Tina, how do we know?
Yes.
Hi, how do we know if we're in the COC or in the balance of state?
So good morning, Anne. Good to see you.
Good morning.
If you are participating, if you're coming to those regional meetings, you're part of the continuum of care. And so some of the requirements for, we said that there's funding available through the continuum of care. And one of the requirements for funding is that you participate in the continuum of care and those regional meetings. So I know, Anne, in your region, we have region 4, the Dissy area. It covers Davie, Iredell, Surrey, Stokes, and Yadkin. Coming to those monthly meetings is your participation and does count towards your attendance with the continuum of care. So, so you can access funds, you can participate and be a part of those discussions and meetings and developing relationships.
Is there then another, because we're supposed to ask you about being a part of balance of state. So I kind of thought that was all together, but since I'm new, I'm trying to sort my way through.
Yeah, so the balance of state, the one slide that I had, it showed that we have 5 regions in the balance of state. And so the way that the balance of state works is when competing for funding through the continuum of care, we compete, that's a federal competition. So the agencies in North Carolina, such as your agency and several other agencies, Fifth Street, Michelle that's on here, several other agencies that are providing emergency shelter, we were competing for federal funds against states and agencies that are in like New York and San Francisco, and with huge resources to be able to help write their competition application. And so what was happening was there was a lot of money in North Carolina that was leaving North Carolina and going to those other states, New York, California, where they have higher numbers of homelessness than what we have. And so actually Department of Health and Human Services decided, hey, we're losing all this money. Let's join together and work together to try to go after this funding. And so there are communities like Gaston, Lincoln, Cleveland, and Winston. Some of those are stronger communities, so they have their own continuum of care. But all the other communities like Surrey and Yadkin and Catawba and Burke and Rutherford, we weren't able to compete against those. And so they said, well, we're just everybody else, and that's where the balance of state, the rest of those that are left over throughout the state, that's where that continuum of care name came from. It's the balance, everybody that was left over in the state that wasn't already part of a continuum of care. And then the continuum of care kind of breaks down by regions. So the balance of state covers 69 counties across North Carolina. So that's a huge continuum of care. And so what they did to make it easier was divided it into regions. And so it works like a tier. So you have the balance of state, and then it drops down to the regions and committees. And so if you're participating in those regional meetings, that is part of the balance of state. So I know that was a long answer to try to explain that.
I think I get it, but I think I'm good then. Okay, thanks, Tina.
Yes, ma'am.
And
I will
Tina,
send out the PowerPoint for you guys.
and what I failed to mention about Tina is that she's one of the most sought after employees at Partners, her and her team. And her PowerPoint gave kind of a macro vision of some things that they're involved in, but her and her team are boots on the ground every day. So I have to commend her, because when I was doing more community work back when I first started my career in a small nonprofit, I felt like I could connect people with food. I could connect people with money sometimes. I could connect people with mental health services or substance use services, but I had always struggled with finding housing. So if you have a person that you're working with that needs housing, it's really hard to get them to address that those other needs that are secondary to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic fundamental needs. So Tina, you and your team are amazing. I'm always amazed at the things that you're able to do and the ways that you get creative and partner with our community partners.
I actually have a
Thank you,
question,
Katie.
because I often get this question, and I'm curious as to how you answer it. The question I often get when it comes to point in time count is, okay, we understand the snapshot thing. We understand that you can't catch everyone. In your opinion, how many homeless people are there in our community? I get that question almost daily. Okay, we get it's a snapshot, but we want to know how many homeless are in Catawba County or Alexander County, and they're expecting an estimate of so many over that point time count number. How do you normally respond to that?
So that's probably one of the hardest answers to say, this is how many we have, because it constantly changes. We can look at our point in time count numbers over time, and they're pretty consistent. They don't go way up or they don't go way down unless we've had errors in our counting. Like last year, we didn't count because of COVID. We didn't do a street count. So our homeless numbers are extremely low, and we don't have those unsheltered counts for the balance of state. Now, some communities did do the street count. And so as a state, if you're looking at those, or a community, you have to look at what happened, what was going on at the time. So we can kind of see the numbers, and they don't fluctuate a whole lot. and from year to year. And I think that's pretty consistent because people are constantly transient. We do miss folks, and we know that there are folks that we're going to miss. And I think that happens across the country. I don't think it's just unique to us. So I think it's really hard to answer that question without just saying, these are our numbers that are consistent, and we think these are close to the numbers that what we have. I don't think they're way off the point in time count. You know, we, depending on the area, you know, Burke County may have 60 people and Catawba County has 200 people. And so I don't think those numbers are way off, but I know that we miss some, and it's really hard to answer. And then the other difficult part of that is the school system has a totally different homeless count than what we do with our point in time count. And so it gets really confusing when you start trying to compare apples to oranges. It just doesn't work. And so we just have to realize the limitations of what the point in time count is, and just truly continue to say, this is a snapshot. This is not everybody. This is the way we see it. And it's pretty consistent, and it's pretty close. I don't think we're missing hundreds of people across our catchment. I'll say, I don't know about other communities, but in our communities that we serve and the point in time counts that we do, I don't think we're missing hundreds of people. I think if we miss people, it's going to be less than 25 or 50 at the most. And that's still a lot. I don't think we're missing 50 people, honestly. But that's just my 2 cents. So others may disagree
And
with that.
Casey, that's a good segue into letting you introduce yourself, Casey, and talk about what you do and build on that.
Okay. Not much. No. So I work for the Hickory Police Department, and my title is Community Navigator. And frankly, what I do is I coordinate between the individuals that our law enforcement officers interact with and the resources that they need, which a majority of that obviously is homelessness. I do a little bit with, getting folks that may not be in homelessness, but helping them get into, drug treatment services and things like that. But yeah, it's more or less being that middleman, almost like a translator, because often the nonprofit speak does not translate well into law enforcement police speak. So it's just helping to coordinate those resources. In some cases, I act as a case manager for those difficult cases, where through behavior and things like that, they have exhausted the resources in the community to the point where they're not welcome there by themselves, due to outbursts and we realize a lot of that is mental health related, but also at the end of the day, we also have to consider the safety of folks. So I get a lot of the clients, the majority of mine are unsheltered, and getting them into services. The other part of my job is educating the community on homelessness and right and wrong ways to help. Avoiding things that will enable the behavior, that will, what am I trying to say? We want to empower them rather than increase the dependency. So we do a lot of, or I try to do a lot of educating the community on right and wrong ways to help the homeless. Rather than passing money through your car window, donating those funds to nonprofits that can stretch that dollar a lot farther. And we know from experience that in 99.9% of the time, that money going out the window goes toward their barrier. It goes toward their addiction. It does not go to food. It does not go to further their improvement. It actually goes to enable the dependency that has, in many cases, caused them to be homeless. So that's it in a nutshell. That's a lot of what I do on a daily.
Casey, can you talk a little bit about like the historical context of why the Hickory Police Department started looking at developing this position and how it came to be?
Sure. I don't know long-term history. I do know that probably 5 to 10 years ago, we came together as a community, DSS, partners, whatever it was called at the time, law enforcement, first responders, and I think brought in an outside company to kind of advise and see what the needs of our community was. And one of the things that they came up with was, frankly, a community navigator, a person to assist our homeless in navigating all of the services that we do have, because frankly, it's overwhelming for us. And, you know, we don't have some of the barriers that our homeless community have. So ultimately, that's where the idea came from. And then I'm fortunate enough to have a police department that is very forward thinking. And frankly, they came up with the idea to put this position into action. And through the ability to, they had an obsolete position that was able to be removed, and then plug this position in. So long and short of it, that's kind of how it came to be. The other part of that is what I did not realize coming from the nonprofit world is how much interaction law enforcement has with homelessness. Frankly, they deal with homelessness more than nonprofits do. You know, I don't know our exact number of calls for service a day, but I would say I'd say 10 to 20% of those are homeless related on a daily basis. To the point where I can't go to all of them. And I've had to educate our law enforcement officers on, you know, how to maneuver minor things. You know, of course, I go on calls when available, but as my caseload increases, the ability to connect with all of them face to face is hard. So a lot of my officers will kind of decide, you know, on the scene if, you know, do they need my services? Are they ready yet? And that kind of thing. Because ultimately it is a diversion program. We want to keep these homeless folks out of our prison system, our jail system. And because it doesn't help. So get them in the services that best benefit them.
And I have one more question for you before we turn it over to the next panelist. Without, you know, with respect to people's privacy, can you tell us a little bit about like some real impact that you've seen?
A lot, actually. A lot of successes, unfortunately, a lot of daily failures, but little things that, because before our two agencies did not communicate constantly. A good example is we had a gentleman that was camping in a particular area, private property. We arrested this gentleman several times. Frankly, we arrested him 2 or 3 times in the same week on the same property. And that's with constant conversations of, hey, this is trespassing. You cannot be on this property. And for a long time, the officers were really scratching their head. Is he wanting to go to jail? You know, what's the issue? So we sat down with this particular person and started working through some things, and learned that he had dementia. He could not remember the conversation from the previous time. So to him, that was his home. As soon as he was released from jail, he would go back to his home. And unfortunately, that's the unfortunate position that our officers are in, is they still have to enforce the law. So it was good that we were there to figure all that out. We learned that he did have family. We were able to communicate with that family, and through some funds that I had at the time and funds from some other agencies, we were able to relocate to a daughter in California, who was able to provide him with some long-term supports. And so that was, and it's a lot of other stories like that, where we often run into small barriers that with a couple dollars or one clothing voucher can solve that problem. You know, Austin Pierce, the soup kitchen, often tells a story of a young man that had a job but did not have the appropriate shoes. Could not step foot on that job, could not go into that warehouse without protective shoes. So what, he's just going to go home and not have a job? Or can we go out and buy him a $60 pair of shoes, and that way he's employed and contributing? And you know, there's a lot of little things. So.
And those individual stories are so powerful because they truly do have a butterfly effect of affecting so many other systems. So even though we're talking about the impact of one person, it really has a much larger ripple effect that affects a lot of our agencies. So I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing. I think it's really progressive and creative.
Well, we try. Hope it's something that catches on. I know that it's catching on in our county, to the point where, you know, we have conversations with other municipalities who have expressed interest. Unfortunately, you know, may not have the line item in their budget for it. But it's partnerships like that. I would like to, I mean, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with LEAD. And we also have a program called Success Essentials. And both of those programs are not just a Hickory Police Department program, but a county-wide program. So, you know, I think that's necessary, and it's necessary not only statewide, but worldwide, for us all to work together on this stuff. That's where our success comes from.
Thank you, Casey. And we're going to turn it over to Ruth now. And she is with City with Dwelling. And Ruth, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you, Katie. I will. And you may hear some background noise because we have open hours this morning at our drop-in center, so it's fairly busy where I am. I am Ruth Burkhaw, and I'm the Executive Director of City with Dwellings. And I'm fairly new to this position. I've been here since midsummer, so I am taking in all this information just like you all are, but have learned a tremendous amount. City with Dwellings has a big, hairy, audacious goal of ending the crisis of homelessness in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. But the way we are doing it is, I think, a little different, but it sounds a lot like what Casey is talking about in some ways. We do it through trying to build sustainable, supportive community. And we basically try to walk alongside our neighbors experiencing homelessness in their journey. They may or may not be successful in the goal of becoming housed, but we like to think that perhaps we have helped them figure out ways to make their own lives more meaningful, and even do a little flourishing every now and then. So what I thought I would do is just share with you the best way for me to describe what City with Dwellings does in Winston-Salem, I think, is to show you a systems map that we developed that kind of helps you understand sort of where folks who are experiencing homelessness end up and what that looks like. So I'm going to share my screen with you and sort of show you. And in the midst of that, hopefully you can all see that. You can see kind of the various, in red, the red circles are the various touch points for City with Dwellings in this process. So if you start at the left side, you have folks who may be unstably housed. And we do some work in prevention and what's called diversion, diverting folks from homelessness or from shelter back to things like Casey talked about, getting somebody on a bus to their mama in Oklahoma, or things that we can do just to prevent folks from being homeless. So we have a small population that we help serve in that regard relative to prevention. Most of our work, though, occurs in sort of that middle section there where it says emergency shelter and then at the bottom, unsheltered homelessness. You know, you can fill 5 football stadiums with the homeless population in the United States. In Winston-Salem, we have about 500 folks on any given night experiencing homelessness, although over half of those are usually in one of our year-round or traditional shelters. Shelters. We primarily serve what are called the unsheltered homeless, and these are folks who are living in places that aren't fit for human habitation. Right now, we have a daily count. In fact, we don't actually do the point in time count as a single night because City with Dwellings actually tracks in collaboration with some other agencies, our street homeless population. So we know that right now there are 224 folks in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County who are what we call unsheltered at this point in time. And this is the group that we really do help. We serve them in the winter with emergency shelter. We do a 4-month overflow shelter program when our year-round shelters are full. We have, with our partners churches, we have some shelters that provide overflow emergency shelter for them. We do that 4 months a year. We also have on our staff a fairly high percentage of folks who are considered peer support specialists. This means they're folks who've either experienced homelessness themselves or in recovery from drug and or alcohol addiction or in mental health care of some kind. We find these folks to be a tremendous asset to our organization, and they really are truly able to walk alongside folks because they've been there. And so we use them quite heavily in our shelter system as well as in our outreach system. And this means we both go out to the folks living in the encampments or under bridges or in abandoned buildings or doorways and try to work with them. We function in similar to Casey as navigators and connectors. We collaborate with our local downtown foot patrol, our first responders, other agencies, other shelter providers, to get them where they need to be when they're ready to receive it. And then we also have what we call a drop-in shelter. It's not quite a day shelter. It's a drop-in center where they can come and work on things like their vital documents. We actually accept mail for about 300 folks in Winston-Salem. You have to have a permanent address to get food stamps. So we serve as a place where folks can get their mail. We help them get their Social Security cards, their birth certificates, whatever they might need in order to be employed or to be housed or to be considered for federal benefits, things like that. We also provide community. COVID has put a bit of a damper on this, but we have done art and music programs. Yesterday we had a Christmas party here where folks did their own little mini trees that they could take with them. So we try to do things so that it's not all about basic needs, but we certainly do connect them to clothing, to foot care, to some of the basic things, that food pantries, things like that. So our outreach work is comprehensive. Folks come to us and we go to them. But we are the ones in town when someone says, I have someone who's living here, send them to City with Dwellings or get them in touch with someone at City with Dwellings. That's sort of the word on the street there. And then finally, we also do some supportive housing work. We have a small experimental project going now called HEART, which is a transitional housing project. Our unsheltered homeless folks are particularly difficult to house because they've been homeless so long often. It's hard to take someone who's lived under a bridge for 20 years and plop them into an apartment and say, okay, good luck. So we have peer support folks that actually live on site in these apartments. We have right now 5 residents from our most vulnerable community living there, and our peer support person works with them on independent living skills, banking, just grocery shopping, just simple things, help them understand what it means to put a grocery list together, to put a menu together, to create actual dish in their kitchen. So we hope to expand this because affordable housing is, quite frankly, a big issue. We can help a person as much as possible, jump through all the hoops, get all the paperwork done. But if there's nowhere for them to go, then we're not going to get them housed. And in Winston-Salem alone, we are short 16,000 units of affordable housing. So that's quite a concern. And as well as just working on things related to, for example, trauma. We know that our folks experiencing homelessness didn't start out wanting to be homeless. And we really know homelessness isn't the problem. It's a symptom of many other problems in our society and our world. And certainly a high percentage of those that we help anyway in our most vulnerable, unsheltered homeless population are folks who've experienced high levels of trauma growing up in their adult lives, or even just being homeless in and of itself is a traumatic experience. So we're going to be working in the future on becoming a more trauma resilient organization in order to see if we can walk alongside folks as they heal from a lot of things going on in their lives. So I will stop talking. I've thrown a lot at you, but you can sort of see how the housing system can be complex and really does require a lot of assistance and help to be navigated by folks who've experienced homelessness.
Thank you, Ruth. And it looks like you guys have done a really good job of mapping it out. And that way it can be explained to different partners about how this works and where a person is in that process.
Absolutely. I have to say, I came out of a different background, project management and association management, and then I was working in a faith-based setting when I came here. So I was not even that familiar with the homeless services system, or that there was one. I just kind of thought, well, you know, the social human services agencies just serve homeless people too, but no, their needs are so complex and complicated that really it requires its own system. And so I needed to see it visually, right, in order to help me understand kind of, and folks can, you know, they can start at one end and go all the way to the other end and then end up somewhere in the middle. It's not a, you know, it's a continuum in terms of actually, you know, kind of going back and forth along it. But yeah.
Thank you. And up next, we have Michelle with Fifth Street Ministries. Michelle, you want to take it away?
Hello, welcome. So I am with Fifth Street Ministries. We are located in Iredell County. We provide several services to the homeless population. We are part of Region 4, which we serve Iredell, Yadkin, Surrey, Stokes, and Davie. So we are the only shelter in those 5 counties that serve single men. So we also serve families and single women, but there are a couple of smaller shelters in the upper northern part of our area that serves single women and families. So our shelter program, we have been in existence since 1990. And we have just kind of grown from there. We have added new programs to address needs as we see them. So our shelter program, our shelter is able to house 150 individuals a night, men, women, children. So we have a family area that serves six families at a time. Each family has their own bedroom, own bathroom. They share a living area and they share a children's play area. And then we have dorms for men and single men and women. And those dorms, you know, they're dormitory style. So the men has about 40. We have 2 different sections, 2 sections for men and 2 sections for women. It just depends on the level they are. Emergency, when they first come into the shelter, they go into the emergency shelter. We assess their needs and we may move them to level 2 because the emergency shelter, you have to leave during the day. They check in at 6:30 at night, they check out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they can be on the property they can be on the property, they just can't be in the building during the day, or in the dorm during the day. So level 2 is for more people that are disabled, that may be working a job and need to sleep during the day or just have different hours and need to be in the building during the day. So level 2 brings people in the building. And we also work more intensively case management with level 2. Level 1s are more chronically homeless. So some people may never make it out of level 1 to level 2. Our families, of course, are always in the shelter all day long. So we have a nurse on staff that does medication management with anybody that needs medication. We are linked. We have a relationship with Contegra Family Medicine, which is a local federally qualified health center. And they see all of our individuals for free. We have to make the connection. So our nurse will see the person, make the connection to Contegra, and they get them in as quickly as possible. They see them for free. They also provide medications for free. And then the nurse will manage those medications. We also have a counselor on staff. So our counselor specializes in domestic violence and sexual assault, but he also does substance abuse therapy, groups, and really any type of therapy, but his specialty is domestic violence and sexual assault. We have 3 case managers on staff. So everyone is assigned a case manager when they check into the shelter. And so the case manager will walk them through from homelessness to housing and all the barriers in between. And we all know there's many barriers from homeless to housing, and it can take a very long time to eliminate those barriers and get somebody into housing. So that's essentially our shelter program. We also have a street outreach program. Street outreach goes out into the community. They're generally just in Iredell County. They go out into the community. They serve, they go to people under bridges, behind buildings, in abandoned buildings, in their cars. They take supplies. So they keep their cars loaded with supplies. And that way, anytime they see somebody, they can distribute supplies, give them information on how to get into the shelter if they would like to come to the shelter. Not everybody would like to come to the shelter. Not everybody wants to come to the shelter because dormitory style can be difficult for some that have anxiety, some mental illnesses. That just is difficult to be in a population setting like that. So we go to them, and we still provide all the same services to those individuals, whether they're in the shelter or not. So we are expanding our street outreach to the Surrey area. I've just posted that position. And so at this time, unfortunately, that position is only going to be funded through June 30th. But my main goal is to get somebody in that position so that we can increase our pit count and get all the street outreach we can in that Surrey County area, Surrey, Stokes, Yadkin, and get them into the system so we can increase our pit count and provide services and get them into another setting besides on the street. So that's our goal right now, that we're working in that program. We also have a battered women's shelter. So our battered women's shelter has 8 bedrooms, and each woman family has their own area, their own space. We do occasionally double up, but during COVID, we have not been doubling up in rooms because they are rather large rooms. So we can double up if need be. We offer counseling there. We offer court advocacy, and we also offer case management, all at that location. Now, you do not have to be a resident of the domestic violence shelter to receive services. So anyone can receive services from the domestic violence shelter. They just need to call us. Let me give you just our basic information. That's just a little bit of information on how to contact us. I didn't put email addresses on there. So we also have a veterans transitional housing program. So that program is funded through the VA. And so there are a lot of restrictions in that program. It's a very intensive program. So it's up to 2 years, intensive case management. They have a housing. We can house up to 5 veterans in that house. And we do peer support classes, life skills, anything that they may need to help them be self-sufficient when we get them into permanent housing. So, cooking on a budget, shopping, easy meals to make. So we do all of those classes there. It's also available. We also have those classes available to all of our residents in all of our programs, but it's they are required to take those classes at the Veterans House. Everywhere else, it's optional. We can't require services. So we serve about 100 people a night in all of our shelters. And so it's a busy place in all of our programs. And we serve about 800 people a year. And that's just in Iredell County. We do serve all the other counties, but they come to us. So they would have to come to us for shelter. If someone is homeless in one of our other counties, we would bring them here to Iredell. So those numbers include other counties as well. So that's a kind of a snapshot of what we do. I was trying to give you a little bit of information. I could probably talk for an hour or more on what we do, but I just wanted to give you a little information, and hopefully maybe you guys have some questions and I could answer those.
Yeah, so
do,
now
Michelle?
we'll just,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I was going to ask her a question.
Sure.
Michelle, we're trying to start a men's shelter in Mount Airy.
Yes.
And I'm working with a man and his wife who are on the street for us, who are going out doing what you're trying to hire for.
Mhm.
They are taking, whenever we get calls, because we don't have a shelter building, they're taking sleeping bags and backpacks
Yes.
with food and things like that out on the street. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you about is we also want to take veterans whenever we get into our building. So is there something that you could send to me about how you set up your veterans program?
Yes, I'm sorry, Ann. I know you and I need to get together. And I actually, when I saw you on this call, I emailed you. So
Okay.
you'll have an email from me. But so I would like to get together with you, but I can definitely share some information, insight on that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm so sorry for interrupting you, Ann. I was just going to say, let's take a few minutes
No
to
problem.
take some questions. So let's have some time here to take any questions that anybody might have. I think one of the observations that I have made listening to everybody talk to each other is that all of the programs, it takes multiple organizations to make them work. So it's a multifaceted system for each one of your programs. Kind of it takes a village thing.
Yes,
Oh, yes.
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Michelle, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is how much availability do you have right now for in your single men's homeless? Because we're getting calls, we don't know where to send them. People are calling us and I'm referring them, I'm actually trying to refer them out to City with Dwellings, referring them out to you. Do you really even have any space right now?
We do have space. The only space right now, we are full in the family area. We have 6
Okay.
families right now, but we do have plenty of space in the men and women single area.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
And just give us a call on that number that I had posted. I took it down. But if you'll give us a call on that number, we ask that the person call ahead of time, do kind of a little background. We ask questions, we give a little background. We kind of do a prevention and diversion screening on everybody that gives us a call. And we unfortunately cannot take sex offenders because we have families in the building.
Right.
So, but we will do that, and then we get an answer back to them and when they can come into the shelter rather quickly.
Perfect. Thank you,
You're
Michelle.
welcome.
Thank you.
I do want to share just a note for everyone that one of the things that we are seeing right now too among homeless individuals and the struggles of getting them into housing is we have the most money now that I've ever seen in 20 plus years of working in housing, between emergency housing vouchers and the emergency solutions grant, COVID funding. A lot of the money, because of COVID, we've gotten a lot of money to try to keep people out of shelters and to house them in other places. But one of the major things that we're seeing is we have a lot of vouchers available to put people in housing. We just can't find the housing that's affordable and that meets the fair market rents and the HUD standards. And so that is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing with rehousing people, and is the housing stock. We've also seen the housing market, how it's affecting the rental market as well. So folks are selling their houses because they can really sell their houses and make a lot of money right now, and they're moving into rentals, and so they're taking up that rental stock, and then that's driving up some of the costs because, of course, supply and demand, there's more demand for units, so the cost goes up for those units. And then we're also seeing landlords that have been in property management or have been in landlord situations for a long time, and maybe they're at the point where they're, you know, kind of getting tired of being a landlord, or this is an opportunity for them to get out and make a lot of money on their property, and so they can sell their property that they've been renting, and then we lose that rental because sometimes that they sell the property and it goes to a family that's looking for a home, or it's going to another landlord who's maybe going to slap a coat of paint on it and jack the rent up and make it unaffordable, you know, for the programs that we work with. So it's kind of a perfect storm right now. We have more money for housing, but we have less housing stock. And so one of the things that we really need advocacy for is inclusive, affordable housing. We don't want to put people in clusters. You know, we don't want to make clusters of poor housing. So building communities where they're all low income or subsidized doesn't really help the community grow and to be more productive. It needs to be integrated communities, and then giving people assistance and helping them, giving assistance as far as assistance with management or navigation, trying to help them through supportive services to help them manage the housing and to manage becoming more self-sufficient. So those are some big things that we're seeing right now that in the housing market and some of the issues that come along with that.
Yeah, yes, Tina, and let me piggyback on that because, you know, we have a lot of people on the waiting list for housing right now. I am actually the coordinated assessment lead for our 5-county region, and we have over 100 people on the waiting list. And the waiting list is moving very slowly. People are staying in shelters longer. They're staying homeless longer because we can't get people into housing. And now that the eviction moratorium, people are starting to be evicted, things are opening up, but it's just a cycle. It's just starting all over. You know, we're putting people into those housing, then we're getting the people that's being evicted. And so we need more housing is the issue. And I know Iredell County is building some housing here in Statesville, and things are happening, but it's going to take a long time. And this funding that we have to put people into housing ends June 30th. So that we're on a time crunch, and if we don't spend it, we're going to lose it. So
yeah, and
Well,
one of the things that we found out during COVID I'm sorry, Casey, one of the things we found out during COVID and the moratorium was when the moratorium on evictions was in place, people weren't getting evicted. And what we found out was our affordable housing is because other people are getting evicted. So I get a place because Michelle gets kicked out. That's where our affordable housing comes from. And so we really saw that during COVID and during the moratorium because Tina wasn't getting kicked out. So Michelle didn't have a place. And so that's kind of what we really learned during COVID too, as far as our housing and affordable housing crisis. I'm sorry, Casey, go ahead.
No. So we are put in an awkward position. Because frankly, in most cases, law enforcement are used to do removals for those evictions. I'm also in contact with realtors, property managers that are either currently, you know, supporting Section 8 vouchers and those that don't. And I say this all the time, and I don't know who I need to say it to for it to actually happen, but we have to find what the incentive is for the landlord. I mean, I hate to sound like a realist and a pessimist, but just simply pulling on their heartstrings is not going to work. It has not worked. Whether it be an agreement that the renter participate in life skills classes, whether it be a fund of some sort that pays for damages. They or, you know, pay an additional security or an increased security deposit, because frankly, we're losing landlords because the folks that we're placing into housing do not have the skills to manage that living situation. You know, we are housing first, and that's wonderful. But, you know, we also have a lot of recidivism where we get them housed, and then we have people like Bonnie Harper out here. Sorry.
Sergeant Anderson, 2609.
We have people like Bonnie Harper that practically kill herself moving her clients from one location to another because they keep getting evicted. And what does that look like? What can we come up with to make it? Because I have to tell myself, if I'm a renter and, you know, I'm investing in my property and I'm spending anywhere from a couple hundred to thousands of dollars repairing my property due to people with Section 8 vouchers. I mean,
And I would say
where
with
we're at.
that too, with the housing first model is a great model. It's taking people where they are and put them in the housing, but you can't put people in the housing without those supports. And I think that's where Casey's getting at is we
Right.
have to have supportive services for individuals. And so anybody can live in housing. It's just we have to wrap supports around them to make sure that they're successful. And that's where our landlords are getting burned because we think that, oh, we found housing for them and we put them in housing, but then we leave them. And a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 months down the road, they're being evicted and they're tearing up the unit and they've done things. And so it's really important that we not only just put people in housing, but we provide them with those supportive services. And that's where I think our behavioral health services really need to be engaged when people are housed, and to make sure that they're able to maintain that housing, because it's so much more traumatic on the individual, the landlord, and our resources when people are evicted, especially those with high needs, particularly with mental health or substance use needs. So burning our bridges with our landlords has cost us a lot just because we haven't been successful at providing supports around the individuals that we're placing in housing, and that has to get better. It's not going to, the market's not going to get better if we don't.
I just wanted to kind of bring this up because I'm sure we're limited on time, and especially I know Tina and we could talk about this for days, but one thing that I wanted to bring up that is a constant for us, so keep in mind, we're working with a lot with unsheltered homeless, where a majority, I think 86% of the ones that we deal with, it's mental health and or substance use related. The issue that we run into, because they are the most visible, are those that do not want services. They're a paranoid schizophrenic that is unmedicated, that will not take medication, will not go to this particular program for one reason or another, that always seem to fall through the cracks, and always end up landing in the police's lap, frankly, because no one else can or will assist them. So we run into a vicious circle of arresting the same individual over and over again because there is no other alternative but jail, because that individual's mental health is preventing them from accepting services. When does it become self-neglect? When does it become an issue for Adult Protective Services to say, okay, they are their own detriment? Frankly, that's what keeps me up at night. That's the ones that hurt the most, is our system, our community is our own detriment in some cases. I understand you know, the change in mental health. I love partners. Don't get me wrong. This is not we need to go back to mental institutions and lock everybody up. That's not what this is. But that is becoming a much larger population in our community with very few to no resources for it, because they will not accept treatment. That doesn't mean, I mean, that it still falls in the lap of the police department to try and handle. And where we don't want to arrest, but we have no other option. So those are the ones that are the hardest. Because, you know, we jokingly say, you know, I wish sometimes I had Haldol and a blowgun, you know, and I could just, you know, medicate these folks and just get their minds right to the point that they start making logical decisions. You know, we've gone the involuntary commitment route, you know, and they'll be in treatment for, you know, month to a couple months, get their injections, but 9 times out of 10, there is no follow-up. There is no accountability on going back for additional injections or getting on a prescription. So it's just a vicious circle. So
I think too, we have to get, it is a slippery slope, because you have to give people dignity with risk and allow them to make decisions about their own health care. And at the same time, you do want to help people be safe. And I think that's where we need to be creative in trying to help those that are experiencing homelessness and those that are experiencing mental health and substance use opportunities to engage in different kinds of treatments, and, you know, not treating folks all the same, but treating people as individuals and understanding there is a challenge there, and really being creative about how we reach out to those folks through outreach. And I know we're probably over our time, so we probably need to turn this back over to you guys, but I do want to say the partnerships within the continuum of care make for more successful transitions for individuals, and we all need to be at the table. It's not a law enforcement issue. It's not a mental health issue. It's not a shelter issue. It's all of our issues, and we have to, you know, we're all complex people, and the individuals that we serve that are experiencing homeless are very complex individuals that need a lot of support. And so we need to work together to make sure that we are helping those folks be successful wherever they are and getting connected to the treatment that they need, if that's what it is, to help them be successful and have dignity and are able to be successful.
Thank you, Tina. And we are getting close to, we're actually over our time allotment, and I appreciate all of you guys hanging in here with me. And I think Pam wants to say something before we close out.
Yes, thank you all. Tina summed it up between you and Casey and everybody else. Michelle, I want to say that we have some wonderful things going on in Iredale, and just to give everybody the smile today going into our Christmas. Today, we are diligently working. We will be serving, looks like right now it's going to be about 250 kids through Iredale Statesville Collaborative, and we've got lots of partners on this call. Our target is the homeless population, the hotels, the Fifth Street Shelter, Goodwill. We're partnering with Goodwill with some folks also. We are serving transitional folks in all of this. So to know that we're serving these families and these children with toys, we did a toy drive specifically for homeless and those in transition. Also, we have a homelessness collaborative. I promised 2 minutes. I told Amber 2 minutes. Guys, we have done so much through partnerships here in Iredale, and there's so many folks on this call. I am the Community Resource Coordinator, Statesville Police Department. Terkeisha Brown Evans is Community Resource Coordinator, Statesville Police Department, South Statesville. And the partners on the phone that I want to give a shout out to, of course, is Partners Behavioral. Our EMS partners on here, they're awesome. Tina has been a godsend, now working with Pamela. We've got, you know, ICGH, this is a great partner. Of course, Michelle, everybody on here. But we have in this collaborative anywhere from 20 to 28 people that get on the call when we monthly meet. If we've got a need, we have history throughout the year. We developed it last January after a captain came and sat in my office and he said, Pam, I can't arrest my way out of this. We've got a situation, as Casey was talking about, it falls on law enforcement. So we called this collaborative group together, and by our second meeting, we started with 4 people. By our second meeting, we had 12, then we've had over 20 involved in these. We get a situation, we put it out to our partners, including Jerry, and we have solved, now I'm saying solved, an immediate situation. If it's a homeless person needing a ride to treatment, needing a ride to medical, if it's somebody that says, I got family that lives in Winston-Salem and Asheville and Charlotte, okay, our guys will come and they'll take them. We've had people in our collaborative pay over $380 for 2 bus tickets to get someone to up north, like to Maine, I believe is where we got them. We've got folks involved both from the faith community. Debbie Page is on here from Iredell Free News. Give a shout out to her. She covered, she sits in on our meetings, and she did an amazing article. If you get the opportunity, look that up online and you'll see some of the great things that we've got going on in Iredell. Do we have all the answers? No, but we have a committed community here that wants to serve those on the streets to help connect them to you as resources, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's medical, whether it's mental health, whether it's, going forward. And that's our commitment here. And we've got a lot of energy. And guys, hey, I love each and every one of your heart to serve, but we've got a great thing going on here in Iredell with our partners. And I applaud everybody that's taken part in that throughout, all of you and all of the counties and all these areas. But a lot of energy here. And we're going to bag more toys. We're serving kids through tomorrow night.
Thank you both, and thank you for what you're doing. And before I hand it over to Jerry to close us out, I did want to take a minute to introduce Holly. She had to jump off to get on another meeting, but she is one of our newest members of the Community Engagement Department, and she is our Regional Director for Cleveland, Lincoln, Gaston. So although she's not here, I'm gonna send her a welcome to partners, and if you're in that area, she is the new Regional Director there. And so I'm going to hand it over to Jerry now to close us down.
Thank you all for joining. One reminder, these cafes happen the 4th Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. We try to make the topics relevant to what the communities want. So next month, coming out of the holiday season, which can be very special, but also be very challenging, especially for the population that many of us work with, we'll be looking at mental wellness during the month of January. We're still working on the agenda, so no names out there on that. But keep in mind, these cafes are designed for everybody on this call, but they're also designed for a lot of people that we don't see that could be benefiting from that as well. So people that we serve, businesses in the community, your chambers, any of those groups are appropriate to join us. We try to limit it to an hour, but when you have stuff like discussions of homelessness and veterans, sometimes they go long. And I hope you all find these worthy of your time. And please invite, like I said, they're open to anyone in the community. With that, I hope everybody has a wonderful and happy holidays, and we will see you all in January.